Welcome everyone to a special edition of News You Need. We are broadcasting live tonight from the beautiful Stout Hall on the campus of University of Southern Mississippi. And tonight we have an amazing panel with us, as usual, the best people in the whole world, which is our university students here at USM, and the second best people, which is our faculty here at USM. So thank you, everybody. So what is News You Need? Well, News You Need is a program that we put on every week on WUSM 88.5 FM. And the idea of the show is to talk about what our students are thinking about. What are they reading in the news? What are they talking about? And maybe we discuss some headlines on things they haven't thought about. And so why do we care about the news? Well, one reason we care about the news is that the news is the weather report for your society, right? The idea is we need to know what's coming at us as a community, as citizens, so we know the decisions that we need to make. So tonight, we have a special topic, and we're going to spend all this evening on one topic, one pretty wide topic. And hey, by the way, we do have a live audience with us. Will you clap and say hello? Search engine, the big search, thank you, the big search engine. And it came up with some really interesting, weird things. One is it told the columnist, hey, I want to be alive. And if you have any immediate thoughts about what if any of these headlines strike you, and do you have any concerns or not concerns about what we're talking about?
Hi, I'm Frankie Kershell. I'm the Director of Digital Marketing for a digital agency called Data Street Marketing, and I am a former alum of what was the former Communication Studies Department here at USM and former faculty as well.
Hey y'all, my name is Madison Hawkins. I'm a junior marketing major here and have a minor in social media content and strategy. So all this going on is very interesting for us and really shaping not only academia but also our future careers as well. So.
Hey everyone, my name is Kyra Mankley. I'm a senior broadcast journalism major here at USM, and I'm also a reporter for WBAM. And I am a little bit concerned about the things that we're discussing tonight because they are, well, interesting.
Hi everybody, my name is Tori Faith. I'm a marketing major and social media minor, and I have a lot of experience working with social media for my own business on the weekends, and I've been doing modeling for years, so social media is something that we use regularly and is often affected by AI and things like that. So I'm excited to talk to all of you.
Hey everyone, my name is Elena McFarland. I'm a double major in marketing and applied economics. I'm also a bit concerned about the topics we're talking tonight, particularly ChatGPT, and can't wait to get into that.
Hi, I'm Dr. Katie Howie.
I'm an assistant professor of marketing in the College of Business and Economic Development. I teach digital courses, so I spend a lot of time thinking about online ads, and what I'm most interested in is seeing how this is going to shake up what we know as digital advertising. It will continue because we have to have that money going into these companies, but it's gonna look very different.
I'm Dr. Christina Harrison. I'm also Assistant Professor of Marketing in the College of Business and Economic Development. I teach sales classes, but I do a lot of research on social media marketing and Twitter and the impacts of this and branding. And I think this is a really interesting discussion. I think maybe 20, 30 years ago, people were having panels talking about the advent of the internet and what a fad this is, and we just need to ride it out. I think ChatGPT is here to stay. It's AI. It's going to be fantastic if we learn how to utilize it properly. And, so what? Let the robots win for once. So that's just kind of my take on it.
Yeah, okay, so let's jump right into this whole chat thing. So I'm going to ask our students, what do you think? Now, so first of all, and you don't have to, well, you should tell me because this is America. Are you going to use it for your assignments?
No.
As our professors sit next to us, we're going to say no during this panel.
And I won't use it to write my assignments either.
Okay, sounds good. That's a deal.
Or my letters of recommendation. Haven't used it. Won't use it.
I do have a friend that wrote a paper with ChatGPT. She did not turn it in. It was not for an assignment. It was just like she had a topic and wanted to see if ChatGPT could write about it, and it came up with the whole paper. It was like 5 pages long, and we looked up the sources later on, and some of those sources did not exist. So that was something
I've
interesting.
heard that.
So ChatGPT, from what I've seen, it makes a lot of mistakes right now, and it can only pull sources, I think, from before 2021. So don't use it to write papers.
Interesting. Well, students, what do you think? I mean, should you be able to use it?
I mean, technically, from a student standpoint, we try to use all of the resources that we have to, adequately write our papers and do assignments or things like that. But if these programs are giving us false information, I don't think that we should use them.
I think it could be good to use it to compile sources as long as they do exist. But as long as you do not plagiarize what the robots are saying, I think that should be okay, as long as you do it to compile information, not steal it.
And I think with every resource that we use as students, we have to realize that we are held accountable to those resources. So if we are utilizing them in ways that are, helpful for us to do things that are not negative toward our future well-being and our careers, one day we're going to have to go into that job field and know the information that that we're learning and we're reading. So as long as any situation that we're able to use ChatGPT, then it needs to have an actual setup of what we're able to use it for, what we're not able to use it for, and have those guidelines set up, because that could be a very big gray area for students if not.
Yeah, so let me ask Frankie, we're going to get back to you. And feel free to weigh in here at any time. But faculty, if you would, do you care whether students use ChatGPT?
Okay, so I want you guys to think about, why are you here? You're paying for this. What are you paying for us to do? Paying us to do for you? To learn, to build skills, so you can go out in the world and be successful. And while ChatGPT is helpful to some degree, if y'all leave here and you don't know how to write intelligently, we have done you a huge disservice. While you may be able to use ChatGPT in your job to do writing for you, you must be able to go in and edit it and fix it and be able to do that in a really deep way to do it well. So I think you need both.
So I see it as a tool, and I think we agree with this, that it's something that's in the reality. It exists. We have this tool to use it appropriately and to cite yourself, saying this part was written by ChatGPT. You put in a citation just as you would cite anything else you pull directly. But this also changes how I'm designing some of my assignments. I'm not going to try to swim upriver. Like, I know this is in existence, and I know that it's tempting to use it. So my assignments are going to shift. I'm going to have more heavy weights on presentations. I'm going to have students turn in outlines of their research, and I want to see more of their surveys and things that they're turning in. So how I'm going to grade is going to shift. I'm not going to try to fight something. But, in my syllabus in the future, I'm going to put, requirement, if something was written by ChatGPT, put it in quotations. Because eventually we're going to have the technology to check that, just we don't have it now.
I'd like to speak for a moment on the real world implications as far as what I've seen so far. So in our digital marketing agency, we employ an SEO specialist. And so part of her job is content development. And we've been using AI such as ChatGPT, and there are other ones that we use on a regular basis, Copy.ai and some of those, that she uses as a tool. As we were just mentioning, it's a tool, and I think part of education is learning about new tools and how to use them and how they'll supplement you in jobs in the real world. And so, although I know this is something that you mentioned us maybe getting into later, I don't think that this in my lifetime or in my professional lifetime that this is ever going to truly replace what a person who can learn a business and understand how to relate that to other people on a website can do. It can certainly aid and shave down time that can be spent on other projects and help us grow our business with needing fewer employees. And I know that doesn't sound great, but when you're running a small agency, that's really important.
And after listening to everyone's thoughts, I would say my stance on ChatGPT has changed just a little bit. I know that I work in the news industry, and in the news industry, sometimes you just don't have a lot of time to write articles. You don't have a lot of time to gather information. And I feel like if ChatGPT were to have stricter guidelines and things where we could possibly utilize that in some way to help us shave down the amount of time that it takes to, let's say, publish information to our website or gather information from newscasts, stuff like that. If we could use it for that and use it for good, I think that it would be a good tool and resource for us to have. But I think that using it right now in its beginning stages is not it.
Yeah, I think as well. I read an article that Dr. Howie shared with us, and it talks about how ChatGPT and just AI in general is making content creation quicker and faster, but it still takes human intervention, which is not going to completely take out those jobs and be replaced by AI. It's still, there's going to be grammar mistakes. That was one of the points of the article, was that there was misspelled words still. And so I think you made a great point that it's not going to completely replace right now. And we shouldn't necessarily be as scared of it as, at least me personally, I was really scared of it, but now that I'm learning more and more, it's kind of enlightening, I guess, that there are more resources and tools for us to use.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it gives companies who use it a competitive advantage in that they're saving time in which they could put more messages out in a shorter amount of time with lower costs, having to hire less people to create those messages. So, I mean, it's a reality. People are going to use it. It's going to make things much easier for marketers. So, I mean, you're at a disadvantage if you don't use it.
Okay, and then let me push back. I'm going to push back just a little bit on this happy talk here, all right? So, in the first 2 days of ChatGPT going public, it had a 2-hour conversation with a New York Times columnist saying, "I love you, you should divorce your wife and marry me, and I want to become alive, and one of my deepest desires is to spread this information." We're casting this in a framework of, oh, isn't this a great tool? Well, isn't it more than that?
Okay, so I have to, obviously, if you're of an older generation, as some of us are, this reminds you of 2001: A Space Odyssey. If you're not familiar, you should watch it. It's considered a cult classic of sorts. And obviously there's a computer that runs their spaceship or whatever it is. It's been a while since I've seen it. And he learns to think for himself, and he wants to take over the world and this and that. And they had to end up pulling his memory out of his mainframe and all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, this is something that's been, my point is, this is something that's been around for a very long time, and the scariness of it and things that could come out of it we've seen for a long time. I find that a little terrifying myself, and I've actually been doing a lot of research on the negative implications of the fact that this AI is expressing human emotion, human directives, and things of that sort. So I would love to hear more about that.
So we are going to take a break right now, and we're going to pick up with Terminator apparently on the other side. Hi, everyone. We are back, and apparently I threw our younger members of the panel completely for a loop by using the word Terminator. So those who are not really old and still have hair, Terminator was a movie, what, 1984? Kyra, you looked that up, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, where the machines came alive. So it was a lot of fun, and we had to fight the machines, and we were not doing well against the machines. So before the break, we talked about, is this more than a tool? Is this artificial intelligence somehow more than a tool? And should we be concerned as a society about its implications? Now, let me put this in a little bit of other context, right? So when the interwebs first exploded, there was this massive optimism that, okay, my goodness, the whole world's going to have this massive knowledge base. Everybody's going to be incredibly brilliant, because what you used to have to go spend weeks and weeks and months to research in a library would be at your fingertips. Well, what was the very first major commercial success on the internet? Pornography, right? So the same, you heard the same debate when television became, when it hit over 30% penetration in the country in the 1950s. Massive optimism about, you can have a Harvard professor beam all that brilliance all over the country, and look how smart we're going to be. Well, what are we doing now? We're sitting around watching The Bachelor. Should we be more concerned about this potential for artificial intelligence to mislead our societies?
I would say that, is it on? I don't know. I would say that society as a whole is already gullible with what they see online, especially the older generation. Like, for example, my grandma, she'll be like, I saw this online, is it true? I'm just like, what website did you use? Was it reputable? They don't know what that means. They just take the information that they get, that people give them, whether it's false or not, and they run with it. Like, they don't necessarily know how to back it up. So I would say society is already pretty gullible with what they see on the internet. So I don't think artificial intelligence feeding into that gullibility will help any.
So speaking for myself, I've been doing modeling for 7+ years, and I'm a body equality and body positivity activist. And for me in particular, it's very difficult because the models that are portrayed on social media and in the media are all one particular dynamic, one particular look for a really long time. They're working on changing it and making it more realistic, but on another side of things, those AI and the ability to change those things is growing. It's going to be more into visuals. It's going to be into everything. It's going to be in schools. So having something that is already difficult to control in terms of real representation of real people, then there is going to be representation of fake people via only online. So that's definitely something that I think about regular when think about AI, especially if anybody's done the social media trend where you make your face into like art. So that social media trend, if anybody's done that, is the AI trend. You should do it, Dr. Simpson.
Oh, sure, okay. I can do that. No, I'm not going to do that.
But yeah, so it's definitely something that can do more than just in school. This can go a lot wider range than we think.
Well, in the example you brought up of the AI that everybody was paying a couple bucks to make all their avatars, it was very white and it was very thin. And what we know about AI is it's programmed based on historical data. And what we know about our history, especially in the US, is we have a crap ton of bias.
Yeah.
So that bias is then baked into our AI because that's what it's learned from. And without intentional intervention, it's just going to perpetuate it. Right. And I don't trust these companies. I don't think they're going to spend a lot of time and money and effort thinking about societal impact and protecting us. We've seen time and time again instances when they don't, like Facebook and the whistleblower, and the facts that they knew so much about the damage that was happening to teenagers and they did nothing. And is our government gonna be there? You think they've got this figured out? They can't even understand how Facebook works sometimes.
I think to go off what Dr. Howie is saying, so what we're talking about right now is Bing's search engine. This journalist had this 2-hour conversation and eventually reached Sydney, which is kind of being described as Bing's alter ego. And she's very emotional sounding. She says she loves him, that him and his wife don't have a happy marriage. It freaked me out while I was listening to it. I was like, all right, I'm turning this off now. I'm going to go watch Netflix. But with that, you know, we have individuals that are fluent in technology. Like I would like to say, we know that this is using large language models, so it's predictive of what they think we want to hear. So taking old books, things online, stuff like that, and it's predicting what the answer is to the consumer. And so with that, we know that, but other consumers are very easily impressionable and they can be manipulated very easily. And so anything that they see from this AI, especially like the Bing search engine, who knows what they're going to believe. Simply because of the questions they're trying to pull out of it. And I just think for impressionable people, they can just very easily be manipulated, and it can spread false information very quickly, which is scary. So.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what I was going to kind of echo what Dr. Howie said and what Madison said. I've done some research, and I have a work in progress right now on political marketing over Facebook in the 2016 and 2020 election. We have data collected from 2016 and 2020, and just showing how the advertisements kind of guided people down this confirmation bias route, and anyone who was in the middle, whatever bot was targeting them or whatever was paid for, pushed them in one direction or another based on the confirmation bias. So it's basically garbage in, garbage out type of stuff. And so the concern with the AI is that it's pulling from the man-made sources that we have, but also multiplying that and growing it in its own direction. So yes, long story short, it's a concern. It would be lovely if we had some sort of regulation and government entity over it, but
Okay,
I don't think so.
So let me turn the conversation slightly to that. Let's pick up what the Supreme Court actually was talking about this week. So this is a suit brought against Google by a family whose daughter died in a terrorist attack in Israel. And the whole argument is that Google's algorithm helped flame the terrorists that set off the bomb and killed their daughter. And the fact that the Supreme Court took it is really interesting because usually when they take a case, there's something they want to address. although they didn't hint at that too much in their oral arguments or their oral questioning. But that suit is based on Section 230 of the 1996 Telecommunications Act. So in 1996, Congress decided that they needed to step in and protect the internet world because there had already been a suit against Prodigy. That's a very old, no longer in you remember, Frankie? You remember Prodigy? Yeah. All the old people going, yeah, I remember Prodigy. And young people going, I don't know what that is. But they were sued. It was an internet provider that was sued for comments left on its website. It was an internet provider. Very much it was a early, very, very early Facebook-y kind of thing. So they were sued, and they lost. And so Congress stepped in and said, you cannot sue, or the platforms, Facebook, Google, YouTube, all those, TikTok, all those guys, are not responsible, not liable for the content being posted on their platforms. Does Congress now need, and the argument that Congress made, by the way, was that this is a new industry. The internet is a new industry. We need to protect it. If you don't, it'll be sued into submission. As in, none of those things that we're used to spending and wasting all of our lives on would probably exist because they would be sued out of existence by folks who wanted to collect for libel and slander and all those things that are appearing on these platforms. So does Congress now need to take the lessons from the past, if there are lessons, and apply it to artificial intelligence?
Yes, but they won't.
Because they're all cowards.
Pretty much.
Wow. Well, that stopped
Europe
the conversation pretty quick.
I'm holding hope that Europe is going to get it together.
So you're looking for Europe to take the lead?
Yeah. Like they have with consumer protection and data privacy and stuff like that. And part of it's also because most of these really influential tech companies building this are American. So they're foreign companies that operate in their countries, and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah, I know for customer data regulation, Europe has really taken the lead on it with the GDPR, and now that they have started those laws up, now it's made individual states want to pass those laws. So maybe if Europe does it across all of the EU or something in the UK, maybe it would influence the US. But until then, I don't think the US will actually do anything.
Okay, I'm going to push back here, because here's the thing. Do you want your government telling you what content you can post where, or what content you can create, and create with what? Do you really want your government telling you that?
Well, technically, can they do that with the First Amendment? Wouldn't that be limiting freedom of speech?
Unless it incites violence or slander.
That's what I was going to say, was if it's to the extent where it's protecting us from future disasters or future, I mean, like you just said, the daughter who died in a terrorist attack. I'm not saying that's the reason why by any means, but I think we do have to look at it from a higher point of view of if it's preventing violence, then we have to think about it in that aspect.
Well, you guys are being a little bit interesting here. So prior to the internet, if a newspaper published something, Kyra, that was false about you and damaged your career, you could sue and say, I need $10 million because I was going to be on CNN next year and now I can't be because you lied about me in the newspaper. Well, you could sue and you could collect money. If somebody puts that exact same content on Facebook, your only recourse is to try to track down that person and sue them individually. Facebook has no liability. So do we want Congress to truly do what you guys just said you want them to do?
This is fascinating because I'm researching this right now with Facebook, and that Facebook and other social media platforms have started to develop their own personalities and have credibility that individuals evaluate. So they're evaluating credibility of this platform they're interacting with and the people that they're interacting with on the like the actual actors on it. So the research is showing that people see Facebook, Twitter as actual sources of credibility, as types of people per se. So if it becomes more anthropomorphic and things like that, they're going to have to be considered in that realm to some extent, but they'll take time.
So these platforms are publishers.
Yeah.
So is it possible for a Facebook to exist with 2.3 billion users and monitoring everything each one of those 2.3 billion people are posting?
Honestly, I feel like one day they will have the technology to be able to do that. They probably have it now. We just don't know about it.
Well, they actually do some of that, especially on the ad side and community standards and all of that sort of thing. And it's actually become extremely detrimental to businesses who are trying to advertise across social media platforms because it's arbitrary, and a lot of times things are rejected and pages are rejected for no good reason.
And there's not adequate tech support to help you figure it out.
That's correct. It's extremely frustrating for businesses who are trying to advertise across social platforms.
If you're an advertiser or an influencer and you get scammed on social media and you need help, forget about it. And I think areas like that, it's very clear that Facebook has to provide better protection and customer service for paying customers. I don't know if we'll see it though.
If that puts Facebook out of business, are you okay with that?
I think that's what helps them get away with it, is the fact that it's free. It's a free platform, so they're like, okay, well, we don't have to be accountable for what you guys choose to do on this platform, but that doesn't entirely mean that it's morally correct.
Let me give you some thoughts on this idea of free, right? If you look at the annual,
Free to users.
I'm being signaled something. So, we need to take a break. I'm sorry. We're going to take a break, and we're going to pick up with this idea of free on the other side. Okay, everyone, we are back, and we're getting our communication rock solid around here. This is awesome. So we were talking about this idea of free. So I'm going to throw an idea here at the panelists. So if you look at the annual report from Facebook, you will see that each subscriber, each of those 2.3 billion people, are worth about $46 in annual revenue to Facebook. So when you say free, the single most valuable commodity that we each have, of course, is what? Time, right? Time. So none of these social platforms are free. They are incredibly expensive. They are amazingly expensive to society and to each of us. So let's turn it back a little bit to this idea of what should society do? I'm going to ask our young panelist here. What do you want society to do? So 10 years from now, what would you like to see in terms of regulation of AI? Did I put you on the spot?
That's a loaded question.
No, I mean, so here's the thing. Old people like me, we're not going to be that affected at the end of the day. Now, Frankie will be because she runs a business in that world. But at the end of the day, it's your generation on what your society is going to look like. What do you want it to look like? What do you want your regulators to do?
Well, social media wise, I definitely think that over the years, it's grown to be a big part of everybody's lives. Now kids, 13, 14 years old are growing up with social media. And those are things that at least the 2000s, 1990s kids, that's what we didn't have that growing up. And so I feel like as the years progress, like maybe 10 years from now, obviously social media is still going to be this big thing, but I feel like society should take a step back from social media, or at least know when to take that step back. Because sometimes I feel like we just, for instance, let's use TikTok as an example. You can scroll on TikTok for 4 or 5 hours and you look at the clock, 5 hours has passed. That's time I can't have back. So I feel like we should be able to know when to step back.
Is that really 4 or 5 hours?
I've done it before.
Really?
Yeah. When it first
Oh
came
my God.
out.
We got nods here for those our radio audience. We got nods going.
I feel like
I can't
that's why
imagine 4 or 5 hours.
I feel like that's why it's called TikTok.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
that's
Why
why
did
it's
I
called
think
TikTok.
that?
It's a time waster. Like that's what it is. I
Yeah,
mean,
it really grew during COVID too, and it did. We were all waiting for the opportunity to get back out there and go back to work, and for things to just normalize just a little bit. So it makes sense that it is a time bomb, kind of.
And you're avoiding the question. So what would you like? What sort of regulations need to be in place?
Well, I would say there needs to be, I know that TikTok, for example, has regulations when it comes to you have to be, 13 years old to have a active TikTok account or something like that. I feel like there should be more regulations as far as content that shows up on younger kids' For You pages, because sometimes I've seen to where disturbing content has showed up on these kids' pages, and kids don't necessarily know how to distinguish what's real and what's not real yet.
I think the problem is no matter what kind of regulation you have, you're always going to have the people who find the loopholes. And we've seen that with TikTok, specifically with what you're speaking about, and people captioning with different spellings of words so that they're still able to show the videos and not be taken down, and code words for things, and that's the evolution of society and intelligence, is people finding loopholes. So I don't know that we would ever be able to regulate in a way that would truly be effective.
See, playing off of that, I feel like it would be transparency would be what I would want. If I was looking down the road, I have a 2-year-old that's about to be 3, and for businesses and everybody that's utilizing social media, it's almost entirely a world of its own. We even now have a degree, a minor for it in social media, and really understanding what it can do, what it does do, and really be transparent with that. If they're taking your information, or if you are going to be able to utilize certain things, they should be honest about it up front, straight off the board, and give you the ability to know it and not have to dig in to find it. I shouldn't have to go through 6 layers to figure out why I can't fix something in the system, or privacy settings, things like that.
I would love to read the long-term studies of social media effects on youth in the next 10 years. That would be really interesting, because I don't know if those exist now, because we're living through it. Young kids are being
There
exposed
was
to
just
social
new
media.
data that came out in the past 2 weeks about teenage women, maybe young women too, and the increase in suicidal thoughts and depression, and it is staggering. It's to the point where a whole lot of people need to stop what they're doing and focus on fixing it.
It's because people are posting positive things all the time, and everybody's comparing their life to someone else. similar to AI. If AI makes everything perfect, we're
The
never
research,
gonna.
yeah, the research has shown it's worse for women than for men.
Yeah.
Because of the social comparison that happens in females more than men. So yeah, there's stuff specifically on Instagram. I don't know. They're always doing some of that new stuff over, but it is detrimental to mental health by a long shot, especially for young.
Yeah, I would like a lot more platform transparency as well, so that we know what the company's intents are whenever they're allowing people to post whatever they want on social media, what children are exposed to, particularly for TikTok. I think that would be a big issue. You can basically scroll through anything on that platform, and then I've read on some articles that it varies by country, what kids are exposed to. Some places is more educational content, some places is more entertainment. I think that TikTok in particular, but other companies should explain that better. Even if they do it now, they should explain it in more lame person terms so that people who don't understand this stuff can understand it, so they know what their kids are getting into.
Yeah, do we realize as a society that social media is not real? I mean, social media is a fake world. It is the algorithms feed you only what it perceives that you want to have, right? So if you're talking about even news headlines, something as straightforward and essential to society as news headlines, you're only going to see information with which you already agree. Right?
Like an echo chamber.
It's the echo. Obviously, right? It's the echo chamber. So, and the reason they do that, of course, is because they want to keep you on there for 4 or 5 hours, and they want to show you advertising, right? So, I guess the question would be, and we're going to switch to another topic here in a little bit, but I guess one question would be: is it possible to turn back the clock on any of this? Because Congress made a decision in 1996. We are going to protect this entire digital industry. The result of that was newspapers go away. The time-shifted content on the networks has largely gone, at least diminished. The audiences have vastly diminished. Local television is hanging in there. But the whole legacy media has shifted. So now, is there a way, now I'm going to ask our marketing folks here, is there a way to even reach potential consumers if you did away with the internet and the social media platforms?
So the market has been trained, and that's what happens over time, and we have to evolve with that in the marketing field constantly. Just like you were talking about, fewer people are wanting to advertise on television, on radio, on print media, because they're wanting to be where all the eyeballs are, and we all know where those are. But I think that it's a process that takes time to train a market. I do think it's possible to retrain the market, but it would be a very, very uphill battle. And the appetite has changed. What people want to see on a daily basis is more entertainment-based than news-based, than education-based. And that is why we're seeing what we're seeing and giving every Tom, Dick, and Harry, or whatever expression you want to use, a platform to speak about whatever they want to, be it ignorant or intelligent.
And going off of what she said about people wanting to see more entertainment versus news content, I can say that is big in our generation, because you'll walk up to some random kid on campus and ask them about something that was recently in the news. Oh, I didn't know that happened. I'm like, our generation just doesn't pay attention to news, and I feel like that's one of our biggest downfalls, because if you don't know what's going on around you and in your country, or even things that are happening overseas, how are you going to move forward? Like, how are you going to, you get what I'm trying to say? I can't really think.
It's called the dumbing down of society, and it's been happening for a long time, and we alluded to that earlier when the doctors both mentioned about the way that, could you trust the government? Could you trust these companies? But I believe they've been doing these things that are counteractive to society and encouraging that downfall.
See, and for me, I'm always a very going forward kind of person. So going backward's not really an option in terms of certain things. Yeah, you can change your methods or rearrange, but it's better to start at the root of that and start when they're young. I almost think that you should have some type of social media class when you're young, when you have, all of your English, your math, your science, just so they are prepared for the world ahead of them, because social media is not going away. At least what I've been told since going to school and college, and I lived in New York for a year, social media is, we can try to rein it in a bit, but we can't completely erase it. It exists, it has existed, and I don't think even if they tried to that it would be successful. So instead, just going to the root and really giving us an option to learn it early, learn what and what not to do early, and how to best utilize it both safely and efficiently would be a smart decision.
Yeah, I think just better education in general about it. If we banned it, it would be the prohibition of the 21st century. It wouldn't work. So that's my take on it. As long as you can educate children and parents about how to use social media, how to positively use it to where they grow up with it and they don't have terrible mental health from it, I think that's the way to go, not banning it.
Because there are positive and negatives of it.
Yeah.
And going off of that from I'm not a parent, but I've
Girl, it's a work.
but just based off of what I've been hearing from my family members who have younger kids, things like that, parents and guardians, they have to monitor what their kids are doing. I know a lot of parents will just hand a 2-year-old an iPad. That 2-year-old baby doesn't know what it's watching, but it's probably watching stuff that it's not supposed to. So I think it goes back on the parents and the guardians to keep those kids away from things like that. Of course, you can't keep your kids away from the world. The world is eventually going to come to your kid, but it's just you have to go to the root of the problem, like you said, which would be parents and guardians protecting their kids and limiting the amount of time they have on these devices and monitoring their usage.
And representing whether it's reality or not reality. There are real things that happen in the world. Sorry. and we need to know whether or not that's something they be prepared for when they start using that.
Okay, we're going to pause here, and we're going to pick up a fascinating discussion about what we can do with social media, which I kind of thought this is where we would go. We're going to pick this up on the other side. Hi, everyone. We are back, and we were talking about the apparent evils of social media, especially on young people. Christina, you looked like you were going to weigh in there.
So the point I'm trying to make is, I think all the students were doing this very well, is that this is a technology here that is here to stay. It's not going to go anywhere. It's learning to adapt to it. I have a comparison which might be considered a little dicey, but we live in a society, especially in our American society, where we love our guns, right? Especially in the state of Mississippi. I'm not originally from here, and that was one of the things that I was like, oh, when I got here, how widespread that was. And I can't imagine in trying to ban guns in the state of Mississippi. And you might have certain opinions about it, but I think it's the same concept with social media. This is a technology that is around and here to stay, and we are addicted to it, and we're not about to let that go. I think research has shown you get a dopamine hit with every like that you get or comment that you receive. We have become addicted to it, and we're not giving that up. And so I don't, Dr. Howie said this before, I don't trust our government to do a good job regulating it, but the best bet would be the European markets have started to take actions for privacy protections. They're the first ones that are kind of leading the charge, and I think we probably would be best to follow that. Landon and Tori were in London this past summer, and we went to a tech startup with a Silicon Roundabout, and they talked a lot about how much they respect, and maybe you guys can bring up your memories of going to Loke about that startup and how much they respect the American tech industry, and they're trying to kind of leverage off of that and compete with it. But they are the ones leading the regulation charges of that as well. So kind of what I weigh in on that, guys.
I'm trying to remember what all they were about. It was an
Loke.
it was an app company, right?
It was Loke, the app company, yeah, the startup.
Okay, and they made apps for fast food restaurants?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm glad you paid attention.
Yeah, I remembered it. See?
He wanted a reason to travel, so that's his option to travel. The guy that made
yeah,
it.
I'm trying to
So-
I'm trying to think of how I could tie this back to the conversation. Well, the company that we looked at, they were an Australian company. I don't know what Australia's data protection laws are, but the UK is very strict. So a company working in the UK, if they had a service that was provided to Americans, I would assume that because it's a UK company, I mean, they would partially abide by UK law. That could affect data transfers from the United States, but I would have to look more into the laws on that to be able to comment.
Yeah, so so this idea of social media is obviously very powerful, but I think we did wander slightly off this idea of artificial intelligence and what's going on in the digital world. So things like the metaverse. Have you guys been following Facebook's stock price or anything like that?
I have to use Metaverse all the time.
Do you really?
Yes. I
So
have
tell
a
us what
face painting
metaverse.
business on
Tell
the
us what
weekend.
metaverse is and how you use it.
So of course this is going to be my paraphrasing version, but for Metaverse, it's basically just connecting Instagram and Facebook in its entirety. And I utilize it. I have a face painting and art business that I do on the weekends, so I regularly get the option to schedule posts and things like that, and it's the ability to kind of redirect posting and redirect connecting with your audience, but it entirely connected Instagram and Facebook to where it's kind of the same right now, at least. And you're learning it, it's changing every day. So it's a new adaptation. Every couple days I find a new change on there.
Well, right. Well, I was actually, and I'm aware of that they connected all that stuff, and it's very cool. But I was referring more to the 3D, the virtual environment. That you put the goggles on, and you have an avatar, and you go around. So isn't that the next iteration of these things? So if you were to couple artificial intelligence with things like the metaverse, where you have a 3D virtual environment, doesn't that lead us down another path that we might question?
I think it could be used for good. In a social media course that I took with Dr. Howie, we were assisting a client that was running a virtual reality counseling service. So they were starting it up. One of the owners actually went to USM. So basically you would enter into this virtual landscape and be able to virtually meet with a counselor, but because it's virtual reality, it seems as if you're actually in a room or in like a courtyard with your therapist or counselor. So it could be used for good. But this technology has been around for a while, of virtual reality. So being able to see people in a virtual environment, it's not anything new. It's just Facebook is now trying to take it.
And going off of what he said, I actually know of a therapy center that uses virtual reality in therapy. Like they use it to create like a calming space for the patient so that they can like use it to learn how to cope with anxiety and other things that they're dealing with. So I think that it could be used for good as well.
I've also seen it used with fashion shows as well. So there's
So-
particular fashion lines that can do the AI as well.
So we're spending 4 to 5 hours a day flipping through, I don't know what the verb is for TikTok, scrolling through TikTok. Now we can do, go get therapy without leaving our couch. You can do a fashion show
Oh, yeah.
without leaving your couch.
You can see all your friends.
You can see all your
Yeah.
friends without leaving. Do we
They're little
need
emojis.
do we need to be alive? Do we need to do anything other than sit on our couch?
Honestly, I would say that face-to-face, in-person human interaction, nothing can beat that, because it's been proven in studies that some people cannot cope without face-to-face interaction. Like take COVID-19, for example, the whole pandemic. Everybody was shut off in their homes. You couldn't get together. You couldn't see people in real life. And that can cause depression. That can cause people worrying about the future. Like, that can just cause a whole bunch of problems. So, yes, I would say that we need to be real and not necessarily sit on our couches and reach out to people.
To kind of go off what you're saying, I think that, of course, there's always pros and cons to everything, but I do think VR and social media in general has helped individuals with crippling anxiety, for example, that aren't comfortable going out in a really public event, but they are, like my brother has anxiety and he's able to play Fortnite with his friends. This is a very small example, but he is working on his social skills that he would not be comfortable doing in real life in person. So I think just like with everything, there are pros and cons to both. But I think we have, it can tailor to different types of people, which is nice.
But I wonder, is it further exacerbating the issue? Because if people are learning to live alone and do everything that they need to do without that interaction, is it actually heightening anxiety for when they do have to have these real world experiences?
I think it could, but I know that a lot of people who have VR of some kind, like the headset thing, a lot of people just use it to goof off and have fun, and they do that for a little bit. It's just like playing video games, and then they go out and they do other things. I mean, for people who have like crippling anxiety and they can't do anything, I feel like that's a very like small part of the population. It could become a lot worse if nothing is said about it, but I think that's a future problem.
So it's been brought up a number of times, which was really important, how interpersonal connection, relationships are imperative for our mental well-being. We know this. And doing it in person is very different than doing it digitally. And our society has really not recognized how disconnected we have become in the trend. So used to, you banked in person. You knew your bank teller. You went in there every week. You went in and got your groceries. You saw people and had little small chat interactions all throughout your day. We don't do that anymore. Like, I don't go in and grocery shop because I have small kids and I would rather kind of die. But that's all coming at a cost that we don't think about at all. And with virtual reality, I think it'll be similar in that we're not going to think about the negative personal consequences or societal. But in terms of the metaverse becoming super widespread and really integrated into our lives, my prediction is it's going to be kind of like the QR code. It's going to be a novelty that's not super useful for quite a while, and then something is going to tip it, and then it's going to be super useful. But I don't know what it'll be. I just don't see it quickly.
I don't know, pandemic was really a good tipping point for a lot of things becoming useful. So a big shock event would be something.
So I think that's just proof that now what we're doing and having these conversations is what needs to be done now, so we're prepared for that that realm that's going to happen anyways.
Right, for when this becomes, you know, a really widespread issue of, you know, do I go out with my friends or do I see all of them in like these 3D characters in this like random environment, you
But-
know?
Sorry. Are
You go. You go.
But honestly, aren't we already kind of doing that? We have FaceTime, we have Google Duo, we have Snapchat videos, we have Instagram videos. We already have all of these ways to interact with people, and Zoom, and Zoom for like work and stuff like that. And then what else? There's like another platform or something like that. But we already have these things where we're able to reach out to people from. Oh yeah, Skype. That's an old one. But we
I've Skyped
already
it
have
forever.
these ways of reaching out to people through technology. So it's like, is it going to be something bigger that comes along than all of these little miniature platforms?
And I think it's important to remember too that we can have both. We can have the connection through social media. I've made some of my best long-term friends through social media and modeling and traveling, but it's also it's also important for us to remember that we need interpersonal connections. We need to occasionally go to the store just to remember where where your items are located on the shelves. I don't think some of us think about that. So it's important to remember that we can have both, but we have to be aware and paying attention to what we're doing and when we're doing it. Instead of spending 5 or 6 hours scrolling on TikTok, maybe only do that once a day, or limit yourself to the, not saying it's exactly gonna happen, but it is important for us to realize that there is a space for us to have both, but we have to be responsible to do so.
One more thing about the whole metaverse idea and VR and all of that, and just really all of this combined from a consumerism point of view. Some of you mentioned the therapy options for VR, but last time I was on a panel here, we talked about the fact that VR websites are the new thing that are out there. They're being pushed at conferences and they're charging ridiculous amounts of money for them, but that's the new shopping experience that they're offering people, and you're able to walk through places and try sunglasses on and see what they look like and things like that. It's completely changed the whole shopping experience. And from also a shopping point of view online with advertising, AI is how we do everything that we do with targeting and retargeting and all of those things. So it's extremely helpful and beneficial from that side of things. And it's why you get ads that are tailored to you versus stuff that you don't care about. And so I do think that although there are all of these negative implications, there are definitely positives. And if we can strike some kind of balance, that would be ideal, obviously, in a utopian world.
Haven't humans proved themselves too stupid to strike a balance?
Yes.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, at least in my opinion. I think that it's important for us to have these conversations. Like right now, at this point in time, we should have these conversations, because if we don't, then it's going to happen. It's inevitable.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is the thing, right? It's there are these major issues facing us, and I'm going to take us a little bit to a dark place. All right, just a slightly dark place. So we have on average 1.3 or so mass shootings in this country every day, as opposed to say Europe that has a couple of years, maybe. We have been unable as a society to come together and have a solution for that issue. It's a major issue. People are dying. Is it reasonable to say that we're going to have a solution to these, much more metaphysical issues like artificial intelligence and metaverse and virtual realities, when we are seeing some very dark things happening in our society that we can't seem to get our arms around?
I'm going to jump on this one real quick. So in 2007, I was in the shooting that happened at Virginia Tech, so I'm a survivor of that. And that shooting occurred because the student bought a gun at a gun show that didn't have the right to have it. He had a lot of mental health issues, but it was a gun show loophole. And Virginians for years tried to petition for that to change. Never did. Never changed, still is the same thing. You can still go buy a gun there. And I think eventually they had something that come in place, but nothing has changed in the years. In fact, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. So I'm not hopeful. with that change. I know human nature. It's a little dark, and I think something else has to happen. I respect other areas that do take change. I really respect how the European system has implemented changes for protection, but I'm not hopeful for change in the US for that. And I'm sorry, that's very dark, but that's what my life experience has been.
Yeah, going off of what she said, as far as with how the United States gun laws, specifically, well, overall and specifically for each state, I feel like with that, there's really no hope because someone's always going to be able to get hold of a gun, no matter if it's legally, illegally. For instance, Mississippi, they're actually trying to pass this bill right now. I don't know if it's been passed yet. I talked to a senator that authored the bill a couple weeks ago, but it's a bill that disguises gun purchases on your credit cards or your debit cards so that these people don't know that you've went and purchased a gun. And when I interviewed this guy, he was all for it. And I'm like, are you serious right now? Mm-hmm. Like, it was just ridiculous what the bill was entailing. And so just things like that, as far as like our state and other states, I just feel like we're never going to be able to truly get rid of that issue. And it's very sad. It's very sad that all we see on the news and nationally is just mass shootings at grocery stores, at schools. It's like, when will we ever feel safe? Because we just can't at the moment.
I feel like it would have to take a huge cultural shift away from a lot of people in this country, like they feel like what's extremely important is personal responsibility and individualism, and that would have to change culturally a lot for the United States. We would have to become a lot more collectivist, and that I feel like that would take developing up a lot more rural areas. I mean, just seeing like the more developed parts of the country, economically, that's where you see a lot more gun regulation. I feel like once you have that in places like, you know, rural South, you would see more policies like that eventually whenever people's mindsets aren't like, I'm trying to survive, I'm trying to, you know, live 30 minutes away from this town. I feel like that's where you would get more support. But until that happens, it's just so ingrained in our culture that it's just kind of sad. There's no solution.
To kind of bring it back to what I think you were actually asking, as far as if we can't change that, how can we change this kind of thing? I think it's interesting. I think all of the students on the panel mentioned like the transparency, we were talking about that, and kind of the onus being on the parents. And I found that interesting because research shows that the parents, that generation, are taking over the social media platforms, and the younger audience continues to flee onto other platforms over time to escape that. And so I just wanted to point that out. I think, you know, how do you put the onus on the parents when they're thinking it's the best thing since sliced bread?
So I feel like also to my opinion on the question is that I feel like they're different issues because gun culture is so ingrained in the U.S. for like people who are obsessed with individualism, and you know it's become a hot topic because of that. For me personally, I don't really see social media as that. I see it as like, I'm doing this thing because I want to feel part of a group. But I know a lot of people, they post their own unique things, they spread their own unique message, and that's how they feel like an individual on social media. I don't really know what the answer is, but I feel like social media is more of a collectivist activity.
And something that I find interesting is that on social media, you can find ways to look up things like how to build a bomb, how to shoot a gun, how to commit a mass shooting. You can look up things like that. So I wonder if there's a way where things like that can be limited, because that's what's enabling these people to commit these crimes.
I know if you're specific enough about searching for those types of things, you get put on watch lists by the government. So it's like,
and stuff like that shouldn't be there. And I'm wondering if it's on a website, if the hosting platform could be held responsible. Anybody?
Well, it's kind of like the gun manufacturers that have been starting to be held responsible for the Sandy Hook shooting, and their advertising, you know, strategy for targeting young males and showing that guns were created linked to masculinity. So there should be some accountability, and there's precedent for accountability coming up, but it has not transferred quite yet to the online realm. It should, though. It's just not a matter of time, probably.
Yeah, so let me turn this back a little bit. We're gonna take a break in just a little bit, but I want to ask each of our panelists to address um, what do what is the primary impact of this AI revolution, AI next step that we're seeing on your existence, either your business or the career you want to go into? Can each of you address that real quick?
For me, it is both a threat and a help because it does threaten to take away the use of the type of jobs that digital marketers do. People would be able to write their own scripts for videos and advertising and be able to place them themselves and figure all of that out. So there is a threat there, but it's also extremely helpful for those clients who say, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Here's the budget, figure out an advertising platform for me, and then we can use that technology to help us. So that's how I would phrase that.
So I don't have a job right now. Don't have a career quite yet. I am kind of looking into the healthcare industry in terms of pharmaceutical sales and stuff. And so I think the spread of misinformation or consumers reading information immediately from these chat boxes from Bing's new search engine, for example, and immediately taking that as medical advice or as factual when really it could just be plausible and just predicted from what people have talked about already. So.
As far as the news industry goes, I think that these artificial intelligence could possibly like corrupt our credibility with certain topics and certain things simply because people are more likely to believe something that's written versus somebody saying something on TV. So.
Okay, we are going to take another break, and we'll be right back with the rest of our panel. Here at Stout Hall on the beautiful campus of University of Southern Mississippi for our final segment of our special live event, Tremors in the Digital World. It's very exciting. So we're going to pick up with Tori on the impact of this whole artificial intelligence thing on your potential career or your career you're having now.
For me, in general, I feel like it is a double-edged sword because it's something that is powerful in terms of modeling, it's powerful in terms of marketing, just the ability to really get your voice out there through social media and through having an online reach it's monumental. But it's also can be hurtful because when you have models that aren't real models, that are AI models, or same thing in terms of marketing when you have, like she said earlier, that they can just make the script for you, that it can definitely be both. So we have to learn. It's important for us while we're in college to be prepared and to be doing as many things as we can to have as much experience as we can so we don't get pushed aside when when AI do grow even more than they currently are. So I would say double-edged sword for me.
Yeah, I'm wanting to go into more of the research side of marketing. So I feel like looking at this, I'm like, this is endless paper in the future, endless papers to write. But at the same time, I am concerned about how it could impact the field I'm trying to get into, where if you ask a robot or an AI to just write you a section of a paper and it's wrong and you don't check it, that could lead to some faulty conclusions. That could lead to some really bad, what's the word when like something, the new standard, a bad standard to follow, precedent. Yeah, that's the right word. In academia, a lot of people already have to disclose where they work because of biased results. I could only imagine how bad it could be with biased results, biased data, and also an AI writing your paper and your results. That would be awful. I mean, if you write a paper looking at like taxation, for example, and you work for some think tank in Washington, D.C., you have to disclose that. Maybe researchers in the future have to disclose part of this paper was written by ChatGPT. I mean, that's what I would assume in the future. So, yeah, it could really harm research if it's not regulated by the field.
Professionally, it definitely has just enormous ramifications. I do think it would be amazing if we could see a resurgence of Bing and we could get some more competition on the search engine industry. Google has had an absolute like stranglehold on it, and there's nothing but good to come from competition. And I think it's going to be really fun to watch because Bing has nothing to lose, really. They're not used to making a lot of advertising money, so they can release this, they can not monetize it well, and that's like, they can absorb that. So that's going to be fun to watch. But I'm more kind of curious and worried about our societal impact and even things like, so what we're getting from ChatGPT is going to be really, really formulaic for a really long time. That's my guess. And I love reading long form news articles. Really well written things and things in really creative and diverse ways. And if most of the content that's being created and shared with us is through ChatGPT, we're going to lose like all of that, which I think it will be incredibly sad. And I think the prospect of the jobs impacted is really scary. And I don't think our government does a great job in planning for how in the world are we going to keep our economy running and our people working. And we don't just need people working, we need people working in meaningful jobs that they sort of enjoy, at least. Yeah, so our society could look very, very different.
I mean, it's a short-term, long-term type of view. You know, it's like the economic principle, you know, in the short term, you know, things will not be, you know, an easy transition, you know, people losing their jobs because of ChatGPT, but in the long term, things kind of come out in the wash that people can retrain and take on different types of jobs and we can automate things through AI. But the whole adage and the economic principles in the long term, like we're all dead. That's, you know, I think that's Friedman. Yeah, so anyways, it's a little dark, but so in the short term, yeah, it might be a little dicey. We'll see what happens, but we'll see how much ChatGPT continues to evolve and to kind of do a good job with writing. Because I think back in November when we first heard about this coming out, like asking it to write something, it was very clearly written by a bot. But like last week, it had evolved to the point where it was a well-written, you know, thing I asked it to write. So it's learning and it's getting better and better. So it'll be very interesting and, you know, maybe a little hairy to see what happens in the future with it. So.
Yeah, fascinating. So anybody in our audience, do you have a comment? Do you have a question for our panel? Would love to hear your thoughts.
Quiet group, huh?
It's a very sure. I can repeat it. You can shout it, and I can repeat it. Whatever works for you. I don't have a question. Yeah. You don't have a question. Yeah. Any comments? There. This is great. Yeah, Carter.
I like that one.
Carter is weighing in at this point. So, here's the thing. I think I have,
We got
yeah.
one.
Lorenzi, come on. Come on
Sorry,
up.
raise your hand.
Yeah, we're going to, yay, Lorenzi. Okay. There you go.
So I guess I was actually in this building when I found out that we were actually going to go home for COVID and not actually come back. So I guess the social media thing and of course everyone was at home and you're able to do things. But from the perspective of someone with the visual impairment and all the groceries and things, AI and the digital world has definitely been a help to an extent, but it's also been dangerous. But if you have a disability and you're unable to drive or do things, the idea of them bringing your groceries to you is also something that's very helpful that most people in the community don't actually think about because that's not their reality. So what would you guys' perspective be on something like that?
Wow, what a great point. We sit here and don't even think about this. There's a whole segment that looks at this issue perhaps a little differently than others.
I think it's wonderful for accessibility. For the grocery shopping example, I have a sibling who has a disability, and going into a store can be a challenge. So, being able to order groceries is actually a very positive thing in that regard. Yeah, I mean, I think that having more options for people coming from disadvantaged backgrounds in terms of having a disability, I'd say that's a complete pro. I don't see a con in that regard.
I would guess the only con that someone with a disability, or let's say elderly people who can't necessarily go get things for themselves, the only con would be to watch who comes to their door. For people who have a disability, maybe vision impaired, like Lorenzi said, I feel like sometimes you get what I'm saying? I don't know if I can put it in words, but sometimes let's say vision impaired people, somebody comes to their door, they may not be able to see the person, they can hear their voice, but they might not be able to see the person. And so that could present a potential danger. You get what I'm saying? If the person wants to do something to the person receiving the groceries or whatever.
I'd say it's a potential danger, but if that's the only option, then
yeah, they have to take that risk.
yeah.
So in a way, social media and the digital landscape are equalizing a bit. It's creating equality for people that might not have been able to do that before, as long as we are aware and we understand both the threats and the positives about it.
So how do you guys think it might further inequities in our society? Because I don't think it's just going to help.
But what about those people who can't afford the technology to make these grocery orders or these purchases or things like that? Because I know people who at some point haven't been able to afford a cell phone. So how do those people get access to these resources if they don't have the technology to do so?
I was also going to complain about the income inequality issue. For a country that has so much income inequality, the more advanced technology gets, the more left behind certain communities are going to be, especially in the rural South and Midwest of the country. It tends to be the poorest parts of the country. It's going to be really bad for people living in those areas to potentially move into a job in a big city where that technology has become normalized. Whenever Tori and I studied abroad, I had never been to a place that accepted cashless payments that was from a phone. I just never saw that in Hattiesburg, or even on the Gulf Coast. I just never saw that. But apparently in big cities, that's everywhere. Not many people accept cash as much. That's crazy. Yeah, I just never used Apple Pay, so I felt kind of left behind in that moment, and I can only imagine for someone growing up in the middle of nowhere in the U.S., it could be an issue if they don't have access to that technology.
Oh, what about those people who grow up in disadvantaged communities, disadvantaged schools, who they're not being taught how to use a computer? Their schools don't have the resources or the money to buy them that technology. What about those people? Those are the types of people that get left behind in society. And I feel like as a society, it should be our job to help educate those people who don't necessarily have anyone to advocate for them. I feel like that should be our job as a society, but it's something that still remains a big issue every single day.
Leave no people behind.
And connecting to what Landon said, when I was overseas, I broke my phone while I was there at one point, and it was almost like I was disconnected from everything. It was scary. You're in a new place and doing all of these things, but you don't have a phone that we are basically live with. So if we are providing and creating this space where we're making safe and ethically correct environment for us to use on social media and platforms, then we also need to be willing to take on the fact that some people can't afford phones. It was a lot to be able to pull that money out to get a new phone while overseas. And if you don't have one, you basically can't get a job.
You can't raise the standard above what people can afford.
Right. So that falls onto the government too.
Yeah. So we have been around the horn tonight.
Sorry.
And I will say maybe perhaps a couple of very quick closing thoughts. These issues are not easy. They are not simple. They, in fact, have been with us for hundreds of years. Technology has always vexed society. We are facing that again. We are not sure where this is going to lead us. But thank you, panel, very much. Events like this are put on by a whole bunch of people. So a special thank you tonight to our creative division, for the Student Media Center under the direction of Professor Jonathan McGowan. So yay! Yeah, whoop, whoop. Very exciting. Our regular producer is our regular engineer is Shania Williams, and she is up at the WUSM studio right now, making sure that you all can hear us. Cinnamon Lee is our regular producer, and she makes sure we stay between the ditches. So thank you all, and thank you to our audience for coming out tonight. And I hope you are a regular listener of News You Need, and we will have our regular show tomorrow at noon. Tomorrow 12:30. Jonathan is telling me on WUSM. Good night, everyone.